There we go. Hey, welcome everybody. We had to wait till our recording started. Just a reminder, this will be recording for a public record. Anybody that has a chance, make sure that you sign our record as you come in or as you leave, please, so we have a public record of who attended. We'd like to go ahead and welcome everybody to the Pleasant View Planning Commission meeting. This is for Thursday, November 21st at 2024, 6 p.m. start. We would like to go ahead and ask to call to order and ask a pledge of allegiance and an opening prayer reading or expression of thought that will be led by Commissioner Brook tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father in heaven, we're grateful for this opportunity we have to meet together tonight as a planning commission, and we're grateful for the support of the citizens of our community, and we're grateful, Father, for this city that we live in and call home, and we're so thankful for all the things we enjoy here, and we ask that thy spirit will be with us tonight as we discuss these important matters as to the future of our city and the recommendations that this body will ultimately make to the council, and we say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Thank you. First item for the commissioner is the declaration of conflicts of interest. All the commissioners have had a chance to read the agenda for tonight. Do we have anybody that needs to declare a conflict of interest for tonight's agenda?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, we can go ahead and move on. To make some comments to let people kind of know where we are at. The first thing I'd like to do is thank everybody for their attendance. We always like it when people come because I would dare say majority of the time that we meet, it's an empty audience out there other than a petitioner. But we also do like to have people show up. We'd love to have people involved in the community events. Okay, just for the recorder, I was going to make sure I knew for the recorder, for the person taking the minutes, all the commissioners and the alternates are in attendance for tonight's meeting, for the record. First of all, I want to go through a little bit of the procedural of what's going to take place tonight for those that were not here 2 weeks ago. We had an item that came before us. It was a public notice. It was noticed out that we would be meeting last week. We discussed all the items, we opened it as a public hearing, and we reviewed it, closed it as a public hearing, and we made some motions. The motions did not carry, and there was someone that actually made a motion, one of the commissioners, that we table making motions until a specific time when we could vote again. When we do that, we usually say, what's the specific reason we would table it and push it? And the one item was that the commissioners on the table would be able to review the sensitive land maps and make sure those newer people could have a chance to familiarize themselves with the information. So we're going to tonight, the public hearing's already been held 2 weeks ago. And the first thing I want to do is thank all of the citizens that have turned in all of their notes, all of their comments. Personally, I've read everyone. I'm just listening to people here. Everybody has read the comments that have been submitted by the citizens, and we want to thank you for that. Where we are going to go tonight is we will leave off. It's not public notice tonight for public hearing. We're just going to continue where we left off. The commissioners had a chance to review their items, and so we're going to go from there. So I'm going to bring back, we have a legislation item, a recommendation for the city council. General plan amendment. This is not a zoning change, so I want to make sure people understand that. This is a general plan amendment. Consideration of a proposed amendment that was tabled to allow the Planning Commission additional time to review the sensitive land study following a public hearing that was held on November 7th. This amendment to the general plan is for 30.6 acres of land located approximately 540 west, 4,300 north, from rural residential 5 to rural residential 2. In a lot of different comments that were tendered in by the citizens that I've read over the last couple days, seems like there's some people that are not understanding in some of the process here, so that's why I'm trying to walk through a little slow so people sure that they're understanding. This is not a zoning change. This is purely an amendment for the process. So, okay, so I'm going to now open up. I think every commissioner's had a chance to review the sense of land use maps and the combination thereof. And we are basically leaving off of where we were at the last meeting. Just as a reminder to the commissioners, this is as a general, and we have a little bit of conflict on it, and that's why this is brought up. We have a road, utilities, and a few things that would be like to be updated. And the general plan says this is where the future land use map or the general plan says we should have a road. We also have it zoned, and the general plan says for A5. So there's a little bit of a conflict of interest, and that's why we are meeting, is to say, how do we get the citizens, the roads, the things that are forward-looking for infrastructure on the hillside for future growth. It's not just what's taking place today, but what takes place in the future for the citizens. So we don't conflict ourselves, but it also needs to match up with the general plan. That's why this is being brought forth. We've had some of the people that have mentioned in the past, why are we seeing this again? We have seen it several times, but it's not this. It has been other items. It's been for different zoning. It's been for different proposals. This is something that's totally different, and we're trying to help accommodate to make sure our general plan matches.
And Tara, if you don't mind if I just kind of reiterate your point, but this is a city driven initiative. And the reason being, because the general plan conflicts with the density and installation of the road, we just already moving forward. And so whether it's removal of the road or change of the density, we need something different to be able to move forward.
Okay, I will go ahead and open up to the commissioners. We can have discussion, we can have questions. Has everybody had a chance to talk on the sensitive land use? Or we are now back to the point of motions on the table?
Maybe a question to start off. Where we left off, now we've had a significant amount of public input. Is that relevant to what we're talking about tonight? Because there was no public comment or very little by.
But this was, we had the public notice and we had a public hearing, and neither side came 2 weeks ago. So now, if people have submitted papers, I think it's very relevant. We should listen to it.
Okay.
But as part of, we have to take that into account of the general plan, right? What's the best for what we're talking about for the general plan going forward?
Okay.
If we're making that amendment.
Okay. Yeah, we're still getting public comment. I just received an email, so just wanted to.
Just be careful that those are now not public records, so we shouldn't be reading those up here. In my opinion, we shouldn't be reading those because we're now in a session. And those are now not privy to everybody up here
Right.
on the diocese.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
Well, I will start off. Before we talk about the sensitive land study, I went back to review the general plan because this is a change in the general plan amendment. And so, sure. So in reading about the general plan, there were a couple of things that came up that were important. It talked about the ability to successfully provide adequate water and other infrastructure. In fact, in the general plan, it talked about in 2013, they had a moratorium here in Pleasant View that they were unable to keep building because they had a water shortage. So in the general plan, the water really is important. And I think that
It is,
turns
and you gotta, let's put it in context, that the moratorium was because there wasn't enough water for the business or the housing units so they could provide more. Once
That-
they had, and it's the
that's right.
city's obligation is to provide for those land uses. So that's why it was just a moratorium. and the city had to take care of.
But I think what you said is really important. That's one of the city's responsibilities is to make sure that there is adequate water.
And we
when-
can't have any building permits without that.
That's correct. And if we are increasing density, we really need to protect our water sources. So when we have an area that has three severe constraints in regards to soil, water, and geology, I think it's really important to pay attention to those. The other thing in the general plan, it specified low-density residential, or A2, is located south of the Ogden-Brigham Canal, east of US 89 and north of 2700 North, which is just a reminder to put A2 in this area of the city really is going against the general plan. Doesn't mean that we can't do it, but it definitely is. But because of this conflict between we need the road going up, I went down to Public Works and talked with Tyson because I really wanted to understand how important is the road going up there. And Tyson was very clear. This is an important road. It's not a road that you can just say, hey, we can do without the road. They piecemeal it. You know, it's not like a pole patch. That road is very important to the infrastructure. My next question was, does it have to be one or the other? Does it have to be either the road or A5, or could it be both? Is there a way to make it work, remaining A5 and yet having the ability to put in the road? And he actually said that there were other options that would not cost the city any money. And so I asked him about those options because those were not options that we had heard about. So I was going to ask Mrs. Maybe, did you, with the committee, did anybody ever talk about a betterment agreement?
I don't recall in any DRC meetings talking about that. That isn't to say that our engineer, public works director, or others or planner didn't have those discussions, but I don't recall being involved in that discussion.
So that's one thing that he brought up that was not discussed, which would be an option. So I had to educate myself on what a betterment agreement is. And the betterment agreement would allow the property to remain in A5 and allows an upgrading of the water pipes, water main, et cetera. That could be benefit to the developer. It's kind of a negotiation thing. There are improvements that the city could do that would result in greater value than before. And it could be an incentive to the developer to work with the city, maintaining the road and maintaining the property A5. So the second one, he talked about a deferral agreement. And Mrs. Maybe, did you talk about a deferment agreement in those committee meetings?
So we really didn't. The challenge that I see with the deferral agreement, and not to say that it's not absolutely possible, is there would have to be sufficient development to the north that wouldn't have additional improvements required. It would still have to meet the Nolan Dolan test. And so if we have, let's say, growth occur to the north and they need access from that road, even the growth from the north to have them help pay for part of that road, it would have to meet that Nolan Dolan test. So we didn't evaluate that with legal. We didn't look into that.
Okay. Now, a third thing that came up that I don't think any of us are aware of, I wasn't aware of, but the city is looking at doing a rural road agreement and having that in place for rural areas. And it would mean that the road would not need to be as wide. It may not have some of the other things that our other roads do. And it would be a road that would be in rural places. And it would not be the 66-foot road that they've talked about going up there, that could be an option. And I'm not saying that any of these are the cherry on top. But what I would like to point out is that there are options to keep an A5 that need to be explored before we just say, hey, let's take the simple route. Developer puts in the road, pays for the road, we change the zoning. I think it's a little disservice to our general plan and maybe even to our citizens to not explore these other options. And I would like to hear what the rest of you have to say. You know, you've heard me for 2 years speak out on the fact that it was time for us to have an open house, that it was time for us to have a general plan amendment, that we get citizen input. Well, Ogden City did theirs. There was a big article in the paper. They had 2 sessions. All the citizens came. And I'm really uncomfortable with us changing the general plan when we have options that really could be on the table.
Julie's asked for feedback or questions or comments. I'll let someone else before I jump in.
Can
Jeff?
I express my thoughts on this? So I read through the sensitive land study. I think I was on my 4th reading of it today, just so I could make sure I really understood this.
Bring your mic down, Jeff.
Is that better? Okay, so first of all, I want to, it says, right here, it says on page 1, it says, this study should not be taken literally without the benefit of more site-specific information when appropriate. And it's if you read through it, and it's a very general study that is actually just a surface study only. So there's no actual soils study being done in this study, according to what they say. So that being said, a few things that I think are appropriate to point out in regards to this specific property is that, first of all, we talk about the future land use plan that we have currently in place was done prior to this study. So this study was making recommendations kind of based on, or they're not even recommendations, they're kind of more general guidelines. And it even says that these are guidelines. In fact, I could find that somewhere. It says it right here. That it says, this is an initial step. That's all this is. This study is designed to guide development, not to constrain or restrict it. So coming right from the study. So that being said, and in effect, well, let me go back to a couple more things that I think are important. Recommendations, it says, require site-specific studies by professional geologists. Require site-specific studies by professional hydrologists. There they are, right there. Okay. It says in here, we go over to this, it says groundwater was not encountered in the test pits, the 10 test pits. And it says this site may be subdivided into 5-acre lots or rezoned down to half-acre lots. I mean, okay, so I based on this, it says we need to do this, which was done, and this is recommending closer to half-acre lots. Okay. That being said, I've always felt that there needed to be some kind of middle ground, which I think the A2 is a great middle ground, personally. And I have some concern, and I think the general public, maybe a few of you know this, and I'm not trying to say you don't know, but there's laws that the state legislature are pushing down, and we know about these laws. We were addressed by the ombudsman back in April that said there's that law that, and I think Mayor Paul brought it up earlier in one of the meetings. The laws there was a law before the state legislature back in the spring, or back last February, that was going to force cities, municipalities to adopt 5,000 square foot lots in any zone anywhere in the city, okay? So that would drastically change the face of any city. And so my personal feelings are you know, I would support the general plan because right now it's still in our control. 6 months down the road, it may not be in our control because legislative session is coming up in 3 months. So it may be out of our control. And so, and maybe not, but whether it's this legislative session or the next one, mark my words, it is coming. And sooner or later, the state is going to tell the cities what they can do in their cities. It is coming. And I think anyone that's involved with any of this housing knows that. So for various reasons, you know, I would be, or for those reasons, I think this study supports the development or at least the changing of. Well, you know, the other thing about this that we have to keep in mind is if we change the general, if we recommend city council the general plan and it ultimately passes, that doesn't mean that it automatically, you automatically get a certain density because the zone change or the zone changes. If the development process comes through and it says, hey, you can't support, you know, 10 homes and you can only support 6 homes, and that's all you're gonna get. And so, I mean, I'm kind of more in favor of letting the process play out and believe me, I get it because I have the same thing going on in my next to my house. I really don't want to see my open fields with deer next to it taken away, but I get it. It's kind of part of the process. So
I get it on these.
Let's hear other people, because you asked for the comment
Okay.
and
So-
you've spoken, so. Other thoughts, comments, questions? You don't have to, I'm opening it up because I've got a few other comments myself.
As I read through the sensitive land study, the factor that seemed to be the most severe was the alluvial fan that is underneath that section. The other concerns don't seem to be specific to that area. The geologic study that was included by the developer addressed some of those geologic concerns in the alluvial fan. I didn't have time, and I'm not an expert to ferret out exactly all the factors in that, but it is nice that you included that study, and maybe we should look at that fairly closely, because that seemed to be the most constraining factor in that area.
Okay, so,
Could I just make one quick
okay,
comment?
quick comment.
Okay, quick comment. On the study, the technical study, what date is on that study?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, it was after 7 years of the most severe drought that Utah has ever experienced. Last spring, water was pouring up that property, and people up above had a retaining wall collapse as well as the people over on the gravel pit road. I was just pointing out that that study was 7 years after the most severe drought in Utah.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump in here and I want to point out a few things. You referenced our Public Works employee coordinator, Tyson. We've heard in the past, he's been part of the general plan, helping us put in our roads, and those are infrastructure things that we need. I've heard him also say, you know, if we don't build it in, then we will have problems. So without Tyson being here, I'd be a little remiss to say, you know, you heard one thing, I heard another, but we don't know how it is in context. We gotta be careful how we're paraphrasing on other people. The ability is to put in roads in the future. We're trying to create the infrastructure. Some of the people mentioned, oh, I've had too much traffic, I have more traffic now, or people are coming down my little roads. Well, if we don't build that infrastructure, it's all gonna keep funneling in the right way. So we just have to keep that in mind. And I'm not saying one thing or another, but when we're looking at the general plan, the layouts of a road over the top of the layouts, you know, that's why it was all done in connection. Yes, some cities have been doing the general plans. We will have to work it into our plan to get that done. because we want the citizens, comment. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort from the staff and from this body, and it will take a lot of effort. David mentioned the alluvial fans. I think this section where we're talking about, it actually says it's one of the inactive or the less active.
No,
And so
actually, it comes
It's,
down.
it's one of the less active. It's the blue, not the red above.
but it's
When I
the
read it,
soil
but
barrier.
there's one paragraph right below where Jeff was quoting some of the paragraphs that just seemed like a ton of bricks when I was reading this. If we change anything with the general plan, it's still not a zone. They still have to come in and present, and it still has to go through proper zoning. They may not get everything because the quote in the sensitive land use was, all development proposals within the study area address the constraints presented in this study, allowing innovative and creative responses to constraints. So basically, and requires a study by a professional. So this group isn't, none of us claim to be professionals. So we're saying if they can come and present something that would work, and then we would rely on our engineers, we would rely on other people, then we would be open or required to be open to listen to those opportunities. This is just step one. How do we match up the general plan with the transportation and with somebody that would like to develop? And so that's my thought.
Can I clarify, Andy? In terms of the alluvial fan on page A5 of the sensitive land study, it is classified as a severe constraint for that area.
Not, the red one's up above it, right?
No.
No, it's right smack over it. It's
Mm,
the orange, the red that you see there.
Then I'm
And
looking
the
at,
section we're looking at is right in the middle of that severe constraint.
and I'm looking at a different one then. Mm,
It's
I don't
got
know with it,
severe
so-
constraint in water.
But I
geology.
go back to my statement, right? It's not for us to interpret their required.
And
to
again, the
then do
geologic
testing
study that I did present addressed that. and-
At
and-
that point.
Didn't seem to find the same issue. I'm just saying that that was that was the only severe condition that came out to me.
Dean, you look like you got a comment.
No,
You're not going to ask, but I'm for the.
John, any comments?
Just a comment. We're at step one of a three-step process. This is a general plan amendment request, not asked for by the developer. This is a proposal from the city. And this has to do with the road. City's looking at connectivity for the future. And they told us that they feel that this is important enough that they're recommending a change. So I think we have to take that into consideration. Second, where this is just a general plan amendment, you're right. There is a rezone process that would have to take place after this in order to get it to A2. And then following that, before any development occurs, there would have to be a subdivision process where all of these issues that we're talking about tonight will be addressed. And those will have to come with new studies, and environmental issues will have to be addressed, and all of this that we're talking about will have to be addressed. This is simply, tonight, in my opinion, this is simply, do we agree that the city has looked at this enough to say this connectivity is important? And we've talked to the landowner, and they're willing to work with us on this, and this may be the chance that we get. So that's where I'm.
Chad, anything?
I guess maybe in my mind, and this is how my mind works, a good plan has to be run and operated by information. And so for us to make amendments to a plan, we have to look at the information that is in front of us. So I know you guys are saying we can stage this to a later date. Well, we could wait until zoning takes place, but we're talking about a general plan that has had public input and has been in place for a long time. And I don't know, there's something in the back of my head that just says, if you're gonna make this significant of a change, because we know this is one step, almost the tip of the iceberg of what is gonna happen to the west of this, how can we make these changes to a plan without considering if this isn't relevant information, getting relevant information that would be contemporaneous today, that could help support a valid change to the plan. So I feel caution in making any change to a plan without fully vetting, and I'm not an expert. And so when I look at constraints, when I look at areas of concern, it just throws up a red flag. Like we've got to address that. We've got to understand that before we make changes to the plan.
Thank you. John, comments?
First, I would reiterate or restate what has been stated before, is that this is the general plan we're discussing, the first step in a three-stage process. After the plan, then the developer could come and make the proposals and to have the rezoning made. And that also is reflected in what's happened historically about this property. Is yes, many of the comments that I read stated that we've gone through this, and I've sat in that part of the audience as we've gone through this a few times as well. But that's the right of a property owner. And whether we change the general plan or not, the property owner always has the right to come and petition for what they would desire. With that said, I guess that doesn't really help me lean one way or the other how I feel about making this change. I have felt that anytime we have a higher density to a significantly lower density areas in a city, rather than abrupt changes, transition areas are nice. Going from an R20 on the east to an A5 on the west, and a 2-acre R2 idea is a reasonable transition. So I guess those are some comments.
Okay. Thank you, Mine.
I've just been thinking, and to go along with what was just said, with when the ombudsman came, he said, change is not coming, change is here. And so this is really tricky because I can see both sides so clearly, and it is hard to choose. But I do feel myself leaning more towards this is inevitable, and so we have an opportunity to help guide things in maybe the most ideal way possible. And so that's my thoughts on hearing all this tonight.
Okay, and I'm just going to reiterate for the vast audience says, we have a choice to recommend approval of a change to the city council. We are only a recommending body tonight. We can recommend a change to the city council. It will go before them, and they will be given all of the same comments and inputs that the citizens have put into it, and they will be able to take that into consideration. We can recommend a denial of the recommended change, and there's always a third that we can table it, but we don't table unless there's specific reasons to have something tabled. It is the obligation of this commission is to keep the movement of the city moving, so developers can have a response, so we can keep the whole thing. Otherwise, it would just get stuck in and we have some developers in here that, they don't like we don't want to be the ones to hold anything up. So that's why we went ahead and held an extra meeting, because we were willing to come and participate to make sure this keeps moving. So with that, I believe we're now to the end of where we were. We tabled it for a specific reason, and I would be open up to any motions on the table at this time.
I will make a motion. My motion would be to deny it, but to make a recommendation going to the city council that the DRC and that they look at exploring how to maintain the A5, but also work on the other options that were given, that were possible options that would put in the road without city cost, but maintain it as A5. And that is my proposal.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have any? Do we have any seconds? Hearing no seconds, the motion dies.
I'll make a motion that we approve legislative item and recommendation to city council, the general plan amendment for the property at 540 west, 4300 north, from rural residential 5 to rural residential 2.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Jeff made the motion, second by Dean. Open for discussion. I'm gonna jump in, a little discussion of, I appreciate Jeff saying earlier, not my backyard, because I have voted as such. And I've had some where I didn't want them in my backyard, so I appreciate what you have going in yours right now. But for this group up here, we have, to, or we're asked to vote with what's on the books now. I'm extremely excited with looking down the road for different road options and looking for some of those things. But I don't have that as a tool in my toolbox right now. So with what we have, that's what I'm required to vote for. And so with that, any other discussion points?
Could I just make one comment that I wanted to share? And all of you know that I live up that way, but I don't want any of you to think my ideas are with that. Truthfully, my husband and I are likely out of here within 5 years, but I would like to see Pleasant View maintained and the general plan followed as the beautiful city it is. But for me, it's actually not in the backyard. We're not going to be there. I just feel it was in the best interest of Pleasant View, and that's why I made my proposal.
Any other discussion items? Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor of the motion of recommendation for approval to the city council? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Two opposed, Julie and Chad. Okay, thank you very much. That will go to the city council and they will have a chance to review that. The citizens are always welcome to come and participate in that session. The mayor will have the opportunity to decide if he wants to take any public comment at that time or not, but we always stress if it ever does come to a zoning change, this will be a public hearing again, and it'll be, we'll make sure that everybody has a chance to review the documents put before us.
And I don't know if a lot of people are aware, but there is a notification tool on the state's public notice website that you can get all of the notices for all of the meetings and hearings. And so if you have interest, definitely encourage you to sign up on that.
Okay, commissioners, any business from the commission for tonight?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a
I'll
motion to
second.
adjourn. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Rolling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.